Is there anything more exciting than seeing a global superstar in a room that is the size of your basement or maybe a room where the fire code just feels like a suggestion?
Right? Like when someone who normally plays to 20,000 people is there, and all of a sudden it's a small room and it's like they're playing just for you.
Well, and it's always advertised in kind of a sneaky way. Come see some local band. And then you go and you end up 5 feet away from Mick Jagger.
Today we're talking about when massive artists go small, secret shows, fake band names, open mic ambushes.
And why sometimes those shows can feel bigger than anything you'd see in an arena.
Let's get into it.
So nice to see you.
Richard, so great to see you. How was your week?
Have you seen anything fun this week?
I Speaking of fun, I think I had the funnest I've had in a really long time. Young Sarah was very excited to
Yep.
see the tower that built the city, which
Mm.
is, of course, about the CN Tower. And it's also about how the city has evolved and it uses the tower as kind of like a touch point. But here is the coolest part of it. I got to see it in the CN Tower.
Yep. That's pretty cool.
Isn't
That
that
is
cool?
pretty cool. There's a little movie theater at the bottom of the tower that nobody seems to know about. I've seen a couple of movies there over the years. It's small, and I don't know really what they usually show there, but it would be cool to see a movie about the tower at the tower.
That's the thing. I obviously love it as an icon and a symbol. I grew up in Brampton, so
Mm.
I'm like the perfect audience for this. I'm like a Toronto fangirl from the moment I could kind of conceptualize space. And my dad would bring me down to the Sky Dome to see Jays games. And so obviously the CN Tower is part of that. I hadn't been up since I was a kid. So yeah,
Right.
I didn't know just how iconic it was, but also like practical. Like it was actually needed for telecommunications at the time. And was really, like, incredible. So, yeah, to be able to hear about it and then see all of it, it was
Well,
magical.
kind of cool that Moses Neimner, who of course is the mind behind Much Music and City TV. If you're a Torontonian, you definitely know what City TV is or probably was. He hasn't had anything to do with it for a long time. But he apparently fought to get the antenna on top of the tower so that he could broadcast, because previous to that, he had been on a small like UHF channel and it didn't get the wide enough audience. So you get that tower on top of the tower, the antenna on top of the tower, and all of a sudden he was heard loud and clear all over the place. I think CFNY also bounced their signal off that when they were a tiny little radio station in Brampton and playing the coolest music in North America, except you couldn't really hear it outside of, the Brampton, maybe into Toronto a little bit. And then they start broadcasting off the tower and everything changed. So it did not only help the city kind of grow up and become kind of hip and cool, but also, I think, created a lot of the pop culture and helped create a lot of the pop culture that we think of today.
How cool is that? And unexpected for me, even as someone who's kind of a super fan of the city. And of course, you would mention that because my favorite part of the film actually involves that moment on the very tip of the tower and what they had to do to get it. It's very exciting, so I'm not going to spoil it at all. It's part of Hot Docs. So it plays on Friday and on Monday, I do believe. So everybody has to check it out. And then I'm sure it will be available and released throughout the country and stuff like that. So keep an eye out because it was fantastic. It gave me all the goosebumpy feelings.
Well, I was invited to that, but I couldn't go because I had a conflict. I saw The Devil Wears Prada 2. And so, it's open. By the time people see this podcast, it will be open and everywhere, and people will know all about it probably because there's so much interest in this online. I have a feeling it should be called The Devil Still Wears Prada. It's been 20 years, and it's kind of the same movie. but it's got an interesting kind of tag to it, which I thought was kind of cool. So, it's the main players are back: Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Stanley Tucci, Emily Blunt. There's a host of new characters, but they're all thrown back into the world of Runway magazine. Here's the thing, though: it's 20 years later. People don't buy magazines anymore. Journalism is under threat, and they take all of this on in the film, and it's not just a little like, oh, I can't get a job, I'm a journalist, I'm out of work. No, it's a major story detail that is really kind of the foundation of this story. And so I was kind of impressed that they would take on something as gloomy as the end of print media, and how journalists want to do good work, and they're out there trying to do good work, but they don't seem to have the kind of backing that they once would have. 20 years ago, uh, when the first movie took place, magazines like that ruled the roost. I just watched an interview with Graydon Carter, who was for many years the publisher of Vanity Fair magazine, and it was extraordinary. There was one writer working there who got paid $500,000 to write 4 stories a year. They would routinely, send people around the world on a hunch that there might be a story tip somewhere else. So, I mean, that's the world that the first movie was set in, when there were kind of no rules. And now there are rules and there's no money. And it's all about how MBAs have taken over these big companies and all the tech bros that run things now. And they don't have, the vision that you would need to, like a Graydon Carter or a Miranda Priestley in the movie. And I thought it was kind of interesting in this Graydon Carter interview. He talks about how these MBAs come in and they start chopping and firing and all the stuff that we see in the movie. And he says, you can't chop your way to greatness. And it's such a great line, and it's so true, and the movie suggests that in kind of a really interesting way. So, I liked it. I don't know if it's going to become kind of the touchstone that the original film is for so many people, but I think if you're a fan of the original, you'll probably like it. If you're not a fan, it might give you the cerulean blues.
You've been working on that one.
It's in the written review. Yeah,
Well, I like to hear it out loud. And you
yeah.
know what? I'm glad to hear that because, obviously we've talked about remakes once or twice here on
Mhm.
Entertainment is Broken, and this does seem like one of the ones that, because there's so many memeable moments or so many quotes, it did seem like one to me that I wasn't rushing to see necessarily because of I thought, "Oh, it's just kinda gonna copy
Yep.
paste." But I'm not now that I think about it, I'm not really surprised because Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway, they're not just gonna like, these are very
And
talented
Emily
people.
Blunt, I mean, and Emily Blunt, who's great in this film, and I think that there was room left to explore these characters a little bit more, especially 20 years on, when the business that was the bedrock of the original story has changed so much, and I think it was a smart choice, maybe a bit of a gloomy choice, but a smart choice, to base it sort of in this world of journalism that is slowly fading away.
And Anne Hathaway is killing it. She looks gorgeous in that,
Mhm.
and I saw her in Mother Mary,
Yeah.
like, the last week before last, and hello, the chops. I think her singing talent was incredible. The dancing, the choreography, and then Michaela Cole opposite her was also incredible, really making
Yeah.
really interesting choices. So
Michaela Cole, who's also in a movie called The Christophers, which is out right now, with Ian McKellen, and so great. And the two of them, McKellen and Michaela Cole, fit together like puzzle pieces. So great.
she is incredible, and
Yeah.
the stuff she's doing in this film really blew me away. I kind of thought like, Anne Hathaway is playing a kind of Lady Gaga typed
Yeah.
character. That's what it spoke to me on the front, but then doing some research, he actually the writer-director David Lowery, I think is his name,
Mhm.
was actually mentioning, like, Taylor Swift as an inspiration. So these I feel like she could have been played by anyone of, like, that stature,
Right.
because there was a kind of coldness to the character of, like, this not penetrable thing. And it's interesting to the conversation we're talking about today because a character like Mother Mary, you would never see in a kind of intimate, stripped
Mm,
down performance. It's kind of the whole point of the movie is that she maybe has let this brand, this show, her work overtake like her own persona.
right.
And it's interesting that it's almost like once you get to a certain point as a star, do you have to strip things away? And today we'll be talking about that and some really huge artists that decided after doing the biggest stages in the world, let me do an 80-person room.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that, hasn't just happened once or twice. Olivia, recently played in a room, Pete's Candy Store, in Brooklyn, I think, for 125 people. I mean, this is a person who could sell out, giant, arenas. You've got, of course, the Rolling Stones have a habit of popping up here and there, but there's something I think about it, and we'll talk about each of the cases kind of individually a little bit, but there's something about it that I think puts people back in touch with the thing that they had before they became famous. So there are great videos of Lady Gaga playing at a place called the Bottom Line. In the Village in New York, and she's singing Led Zeppelin covers, and she's not yet Lady Gaga. She's still Stephanie Gremolata. Is that her
I
last name?
think
She's
so,
still,
yes.
yeah, she is still that person, and it's terrific. I mean, she's obviously a star. She's such a good singer. It's really entertaining, but it's small. And the glimpses that you get of the audience is like most people are. There's some that are just like sitting there drinking beer while not having any idea of what was to come. But there's something that's really authentic and kind of great about it. It's the thing that I love about going to a small place and seeing a band in a small place, whether you've heard of them or not, is that there's an electricity between the audience and the band that's on stage. And I think when you have, the Green Days and, the Prince after shows and all that stuff, but when you have those people going back and playing these small shows, I think what they're doing is firing up again, recharging that authenticity battery that may have depleted a little bit because as you get more and more famous, the more and more space comes between you and your audience. And you have to occasionally just remind yourself what's that feeling like when they're all rammed up around the stage and you can really feel the energy from them, and what's it like to play in a tiny little club, and what's it like just to have that much fun. And I think the Rolling Stones have made really great use of that over the years, but so have lots of other people. Good stuff.
Well, and so I love the idea that there's the feeling of you could capture this essence when a star is on the come up or, you see a band before they get famous, which is a special vibe. But of
Yes.
course, then this idea that a star reaches that level and then you still have that chance, I think it kind of changes the way you view their artistry as well. I think on our perspective, not only does it bring the artist closer to their art, but it also brings the audience closer to the artist in seeing them as a real person. And there is
Mhm.
a rawness there, like the Olivia Rodrigo example. There's videos of it. This Pete's Candy Store in Brooklyn is an iconic location. It visually looks amazing, but there are people who pull out their phones and takes clips, and so I've seen it, and there is like, does it sound perfect? No. Does it sound like someone like a Beyoncé or a Taylor Swift or potentially a Lady Gaga at this point would want someone like getting clipped like that and having it out? Not exactly. So I do think that there is like it's a risk here for an artist, but it's so
Yep.
worth it. But I think it also comes with the expectation of the audience to realize that it isn't going to be this polished mega performance, and that there, in order to have this kind of element, it does have to be, it's going to be raw, it's going to be not unpolished a bit, and pretty inaccessible as well.
And I think that there's something about the rawness of it that is kind of the whole point of doing these small shows. When you've attained some sort of large status where you have to try and create a huge spectacle every time you step on an arena stage. If you can just strip that all away, I think that's what is the appealing part of this.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it has to be somewhat aspirational, inspirational when certain artists do it. It must be kind of like a desire, a snowball effect for other artists,
Mm,
you know? And so I love the idea of someone like Olivia Rodrigo. She's so young and she has such this
yes.
perfect energy for her audience. You know, there is that parasocial aspect going on. She sings songs that are personal to her. She is a songwriter, not just a singer. And
Yep.
so she's the perfect artist for this. And then, yeah, I love the idea that, even there could even be a chance that I'm in a bar in Houston and
Yeah.
Beyonce walks through those doors just because she's feeling like it. You're right. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think I can discount anybody.
Yeah, no, you listen, when the Rolling Stones did it in 1977, it was in Toronto at, the El Mocambo. They advertised themselves as the Cockroaches. Nobody knew who the Cockroaches were. There's a small group of, super hip people who probably knew what was happening. But the April Wine were being promoted as well, and April Wine were big. I mean, April Wine were, uh, you know, very radio friendly. I love them. They're from the East Coast. I'm from the East Coast, and when I was growing up, they had big hits on the radio and continued to for long afterwards. And it was advertised that they were playing with a band that you've never heard of. Then, of course, it turns out that it's April Wine opening from the Rolling Stones, and it was a radio contest entry. You could line up to see them, and Dion Combo. We think of it now as the place where the Rolling Stones played, but that place has been there since the 1940s, and I think of it as the place where, Elvis Costello played, when he first toured through here, where a lot of bands played for the first time as they toured through Toronto. So it's a legendary spot, made only more legendary by the Rolling Stones. And then, of course, Margaret Trudeau shows up, and that causes, the wife of then, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, and that causes a whole shitstorm, and there's just all sorts of legendary rock and roll that happened, or he literally had it all: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Everything that you imagined a Rolling Stones set at a club would be actually happened there. And then they released it on the Love You Live album, or at least one side of the Love You Live album was recorded there. And if you listen to it, it still sounds great. They play an unusual kind of variety of songs, but they are rough and they are ready. And it is, to me, so much more appealing, that stuff, that kind of rawness, than anything that they've released, in the subsequent years. They've made the odd good record, the odd good song, and I still like the Rolling Stones, but I love that set, that the collection of 5 or 6 songs from the Alma Combo they released on Love You Live, because it feels like a rock show, and it feels like there's something to lose, and it feels like there's something really kind of, like, electric and magical happening on those grooves.
Ah! And the Elma combo is still open to this day.
It sure is.
I
It's a
s
little different. Your feet don't stick to the floor anymore.
so it's a little,
It's a little nicer. Yeah.
the palms are still there, though. They
Mhm.
have, like, these iconic neon palm trees.
Well, that was the sign is a palm tree, and the ads that used to be on the radio, and I could never, like, exactly figure it out because it doesn't rhyme, but in my head, it seemed to rhyme, but it was a place of charm under the neon palm, and the way they would say it on the radio kind of forced the rhyme a little bit, I think, but, legendary spot, absolutely legendary spot, and you're right, it's still going today.
So that's amazing too, is that that legacy carries on where now it's like I'm seeing Priyanka, who is iconic herself, iconic drag queen,
Yeah.
music performer, dancer, but I'm seeing it where the Rolling Stones had their secret show. It's like, and I know that that's special for the bands that play there too. It's just it's a gift that keeps on giving. So, and like, we need to go to these places and support these places and talk about
Yeah,
these stories more because they will disappear like that, and then we can't.
Yeah,
recreate
the
these
Rolling
things.
Stones also played at the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto as well, and they've done these shows in lots of cities, but they happen Toronto holds a special place for them because, their promoters were from Toronto for a number of their really big tours, so they would rehearse here, they would play here, they would get a place called, the Masonic Temple, which is right around the corner from where I'm sitting, and they would, like, get ready for the tours there, and they would live here. And one time I was going to the Four Seasons hotel to shoot an interview for a show I was working on, and I'm in a van with the crew guys. We were going to have to carry up all the cameras and stuff. And I look out the window as we're in the underground parking lot, and Charlie Watts, one of the greatest drummers to ever live, the drummer of the Rolling Stones, is in a car, sort of driving past me. That it's August, windows are rolled down, and I went, "Oh my God, it's Charlie Watts!" in a really loud, obtrusive way. And he looked terrified, couldn't see where the voice was coming from because I was in a van, and quickly rolled up his window. So I'm sorry, Charlie. He's no longer with us, but uh, I apologize.
Incredible story, incredible story. And it underpins the magic of this idea that you could just be sitting in a place, and one of the greatest, like, the some of the greatest talent could just, like, walk through the doors, and when I heard we were doing this topic, I instantly thought of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Music Festival, A, because it's
Yes.
going on right now, and Stevie Nicks performed. She Summoned a Rainbow that came out. Look up the clips. It's this incredible, incredible, like, 8-day over 2 weekends music jazz and music festival, like, it ranges all the genres because, of course, jazz is the bedrock of all genres, and even the festival itself, because there is so many huge names, and then every local act also shows up, even within the festival itself, you can see some of the most iconic musicians you've ever seen, and they're on, like, the B stage, the C stage.
Right.
So that's one thing. But then also what happens is Jazz Fest is only in the day, which Quint Davis, who is the creator of Jazz Fest, this like incredible impresario of New Orleans and New Orleans Music and Heritage and Culture Fest. So he wanted to make sure that it was like lots of music festivals run through the night, South by Southwest,
Yeah.
for example. And he never wanted to do that. He always wanted to stop at like 5. I think the headliner's going at 7, so that the city could actually be infused with
Right.
the economic benefits of having all these tourists here. So they're not just coming in to his festival, spending all their days there, and then leaving. And so what happens is you have like these incredible, massive bands. When I was there, we heard that Stevie Wonder was somewhere in the French Quarter. Someone put on Facebook, it was a clip, and we did detective work. "Oh, that looks like the Blue Nile. We got there. We just missed him. We spent" so you spend the whole night doing these things, and I think that's like we never saw Stevie Wonder. Newsflash, did not
Right.
happen, but I'll never forget that, and it
Yeah.
it coulda happened, you know? So I think, like, that kind of magic is, and there's ways, like, if I think about it too, and people are listening, there are ways that you can, up the ante, up the probability that this could happen to you. Music festivals is one of them. Supporting iconic venues is one of them because you never know, right? And I think it does help to be in a city like New Orleans, for example, or
Yeah.
Toronto, where there is so much happening,
Yeah.
so there is a competition as well.
Yeah, or New York. I mean, I've had really good luck at a place called the Comedy Cellar in New York, and it's different. It's not, Stevie Wonder's not showing up to do comedy, but almost every time that I've been there, and I've been there a lot of times, it's a legendary place. Been there since the 50s. Everyone who has ever picked up a microphone to do comedy, that's not true, but anyone you've ever heard of probably has walked through those doors. And every time we're there, someone massive walks in and says, "Hey, I want to try a set. I want to do a few things here." And it's always so exciting. And then around the corner, that's on McDougal Street. in the Village. Then
When you
around the
think of
corner,
Seinfeld and him on the thing, that's like the Comedy Cellar, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the brick wall, and there's a sign like a stained glass sign that says the Comedy Cellar, but it's very bare bones. But it's an incredible place to see comedy because the ceiling's really low, and they pack you in there, so there is nothing to do but to focus on exactly what's happening on that tiny little stage, and it's a great place to see comedy. Around the corner on Third Avenue, they have a place called the Fat Black Pussycat, which is connected to the Comedy Cellar, but it's a slightly different kind of space, but it's an equally cool space. And what they do is have secret shows that they'll say at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. We're doing a show. We're not going to tell you who's on it, but tickets are $20. And you go, and there's one room there that only seats, I think, 50 or 60 people, and we've gone several times. And the first time we went, Amy Schumer was the comedian who was trying out new material. And it's always someone sort of that. And we've heard that Dave Chappelle goes and tries to work out material there as well. So it's, kind of everyone that does these like crazy little secret shows that are $20, and you just have to put your ear to the ground and find out about them. But we've always had a really good time at them.
It's kind of I think we talked about, this at the front. It's like true artists, right? They need a variety of mediums, a variety of
Right.
stages and outputs, right? Like it is interesting to me to hear that, like, yeah, they're working new stuff out. I think of
Mhm.
Hacks and Jean Smart's character in Hacks, and she had to do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's about maybe practice, creative freedom, going back to the well. Like, if you're going back to that natural energy of being, like, closer to your audience, then you're also probably going back to that, like, original artistic well. It's incredible to think of, it's also interesting to think of the idea that the space itself can help to
Oh,
elicit this.
the space itself, I mean, certainly in comedy, the space is everything. And, I don't like going to see big comedy shows. I've been to comedy shows in arena. I saw Kevin Hart a number of years ago in Montreal at I think it's called the Bell Center. It is just too big. It's just far too large. There's nothing intimate about it at all. I've seen comics in lots of different, like at the place like the Sony Center, which I think is about 2,500 seats, or Massey Hall, which is 2,000, 2,500, something like that. But for me, it's a club thing. It's got to be tight and steamy, and I wish people could still smoke because that would add another layer of atmosphere to it. I don't want to smoke anymore, but I wish people around me were.
Hell yeah.
And yeah. So, that really, really does make a difference. And I love when we're at the Comedy Cellar. And so I remember being there, and Colin Quinn showed up, and he had a notebook with him, and he's like, "I'm trying out some new stuff. I apologize, everyone. I just," and he went through it, and some of it was great, some of it was not, but I really liked seeing the artistic process of him looking at this piece of paper, or this notebook that he had, and I was sitting in the almost on the stage. I was sitting in the very front row, and you could see that the notebook would have 3 or 4 words written down on a page, you know? I kicked my dog by mistake, or whatever, and that was where he was gonna go, and he was working it out. And it was really incredible to see. And I'm sure that had I gone to see him, had the chance to see him 6 months later, that probably some of that stuff that we saw would be there, but it would have been reformed and words like a comic like Colin Quinn is so careful about his word choice in everything that they would have been reshaped and reworked and to something incredible. But
Which
it was really cool to see that in process.
Yeah, you literally can't do to those rooms of 300, 400. That's
Yeah.
when it needs to be polished and on,
Mhm.
and I think of jazz in a similar way because my mind goes to this jazz club called the Yardbird Suite in Edmonton.
Yeah.
Edmonton is a
Yeah, yeah.
very great jazz city.
I've heard about this place, and I've heard, that, you to get booked it's like it takes a year to get booked there because they do a lot of shows, but it's such a popular hotspot and everybody wants to play it.
Just like the Comedy Cellar is like a comedian's
Right.
comedy place,
High
the
mark, yes.
Yardbird Suite is a jazz musician's jazz club, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's why these things aren't gonna disappear. And no matter how successful an artist gets, there's something about these rooms, these spaces that are curated, it's necessary for the art. And or you mentioned Massey Hall. Artists are always gonna want to perform in these
Yeah.
iconic and curated spaces for themselves. I saw Christian Atunde Adjua Scott at the Yardbird Suite in Edmonton,
Right.
who is like he's sold out Carnegie Hall. Like this is
Yeah.
as incredible as a musician as it gets. He's influenced musicians from Trombone Shorty and Lenny Kravitz, and he actually was the inspiration for one of the main characters in the show Treme, which
Right.
I've
Right.
talked about my love for that show on here before. And so I've seen him at Jazz Fest on a massive stage. And because he was coming from New Orleans, and so yeah, in New Orleans, he's selling out massive shows because the people recognize and
Right.
know, right? But in Edmonton, you know, the word didn't spread, even though it is a great jazz city. It was also like storming,
Hmm.
blizzarding. We bundled up and we made the trek. And there was like Christian Scott played to like four of us. And I could
Mm.
tell from his perspective, he did not care at all. It was almost, you could tell I think he must have played one of the best shows of his life. It was so he was sweating, he was so intimate, and he was collaborating with someone from Edmonton. So
Right.
again, it's like and that's another tip if you're thinking, "Oh, like, but that could never happen to me. I could never see Olivia Rodrigo." You could. Do your homework. Find these places in your city and support them because A, even if you don't see if Christian Scott hadn't walked in, you know, there would have been another great local band there for me to
Yeah.
see, and then that could have been one of those I saw them back when moments. So that's another tip I think, festivals, special curated spaces that have history
Yeah.
and legacy to them.
And when there's a scene like the Edmonton has a jazz scene that is sort of revolves around this place, and the Horseshoe doesn't do these shows anymore, and I kind of wish they would, but they used to do these shows twice a year, and it was called the Wheel of Elvis, and they had a live band on stage with the great Teddy Fury playing drums, and they had a big wheel with Elvis songs on it. So, like you'd see at a carnival or something, you'd spin it, and people from the audience would go up and they'd spin the wheel, and whatever it landed on, you had to sing
I'm
with the live band.
obsessed.
So fun, but because it was at the Horseshoe and because, you know, there was a very much in those days, it's a little maybe a little different now, but it was very much a collaborative scene where everyone kind of knew one another and that you'd get, Gord Downie on stage singing an Elvis song, or Andy Mays from the Skydiggers, or whoever happened to be in town would come up and do these shows, and honestly, I went they did twice a year on his birthday and on the day he died, so January and in, August, and they were 2 of the most fun shows that you would ever go to, whether or not anyone famous showed up or not, but more often than not, somebody that you kinda couldn't believe was there, would be there, and then they'd just go back and, you know, stand at the bar and have a beer at the afterwards. So great, so fun.
That's incredible. Yeah, and different places have their different scenes. And so
Yeah.
I would you know, I before I was a jazz fan, I wasn't a jazz fan. I tell this to
Mm.
people a lot, and I that sounds like obvious, but people always say to me like, "Oh, I could never be a jazz fan," and it seems so inaccessible. There's reasons why things are revered. And just because it might not like tickle your fancy at first glance, I think it is important to, like you're saying, find the scene. If there is a local scene that you have like access to, you're like, oh, I've never been to this festival. I've never got into like house music, for example, is something
Right.
that's like a huge gap for me. I make it a point to kind of do some research, see the like fundamentals of this thing. And if you have access to it and it's around you, dip your toes into places that you might not have been before because honestly, it has always paid out for me. Like you're saying, it's like it's like the reward of it's a reward of patience and art
Yeah.
appreciation,
Yeah,
because once it's like you get to the point where you're like, "I don't even care if these people are famous because the music's so good," and
yeah.
now, wow, you're in this world and you're open. You've opened this
Well,
whole thing.
I didn't know anything about jazz, in my early years of living in Toronto, but there were a lot of jazz clubs. There was, the Rex Hotel, there was George's Spaghetti House, there was, a couple of other places that were around, a place called Bourbon Street that I remember on Queen Street, and, I used to go. I would go. They were like, I went to see music 4 or 5 nights a week probably, so I would end up at these jazz clubs, and it wasn't really until later that I realized that I was seeing people like Ed Bickert, and, he would just be a guitar player who played around a lot. He lived in Toronto, and I didn't realize what a legend he was, and I didn't realize, what a privilege it was to have these small jazz clubs that you could actually, see these bands at. I ran a jazz and blues nightclub in Victoria, BC, a long time ago, 40 years ago, and,
I have to
um
interject. I need a time machine just so I can insert myself into the various scenarios in which you create for us here on
It
Entertainment
it
is
it
Broken.
it it was a messy time, but I did a lot of things. I had some fun, but I was, sort of, getting this jazz club going, and we had the most incredible, booker at this place, and because it was in Victoria, BC, we've got all these amazing, American acts that would come up and come through, and it wasn't enormous. It was 400 seats probably, which is a sizable club, but not, really unwieldy. And, one year, I loved Dr. John. Dr. John, is a musician that I have
Richard,
loved s Oh, there you have it. Oh, you are a Dr. John fan. Well,
I can't even hear you. I got too
yeah.
excited.
Well, sit back and enjoy this story. So Dr. John gets, like, take a picture of this. So Dr. John gets booked at the club, and he's gonna play solo. He's gonna play solo, and he's gonna, just, him and a piano. And so it's November, maybe December, I don't remember. And I'm in the club when he shows up, because we had to bring in a special piano for him and get it specially tuned and all the stuff that you do, when you run a club like that. And I was, kicking around, and Dr. John came in, and I shook his hand, and his fingers were enormous. They're just like little sausages. And I was like, wow, I mean, how do you play like that with those fingers? And then, we chatted a little bit, and the sound guy showed up, and Dr. John said, "Is there anything you'd like to hear me play?" And I said, "Why, yes, Dr. John. I would love to hear you play some, Cajun and Creole Christmas songs." It was getting to be that time of year, and he played for me and the sound guy as I sit there in those days smoking Camel cigarettes on the lip of the stage while he played, just second, a couple of feet away from me. And it was an incredible musical moment that I will never, ever forget.
For those of you just listening, I ran to get my 20 Dr. John albums here.
Mhm.
Um, okay, when we think about the type of musician that we're talking about here, like, yeah, Dr. John would prefer to be in a club like that, right?
Sure.
Like, yeah, they got to do what they got to do to make money and make shows, but like, these are true artists. They're true
Yeah.
artists, and so beyond supporting local and small, and also is free because often Dr. John will, and New Orleans musicians in general. Sorry, you got me so excited. I don't even know where to go from here.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at so one of the things that I remember about Dr. John so much was that he had this really kind of, interesting voice. He kind of talked like, and he had that sort of he was born in Virginia but lived in New Orleans, so he had this really kind of wild accent. But he also spoke In a way, and I'm just trying to find there's some quotes here because I won't be able to do it justice, but he spoke in the most colorful manner of anyone, like a jazz guy from the 1940s who you almost have to wonder, like, are you actually still speaking English? Because I can't really put it, but it was so beautiful and so cool. Um, so just let me just see if I can find uh some quotes here because honestly, you had to kind of hear it from his lips into your ears. Um, please go ahead and I'll,
His m
okay.
Perfect.
Um, okay, hang on.
He's so fantastical and experiential and
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. So his lingo, the internet is telling me, is a mix of French and Creole with the bio drawl, plus hipster slang from the 50s and 60s, jazz and R&B scene. Um, he he would say if something was nonsense, he would say that's jivosity, which means it's jive. um, uh, let's see here. Yeah, I mean, just and I remember him saying a lot, "Can you dig it?" As he'd tell me a story. He'd say, "Can you dig it?" But I I I can't find anything really that expresses how incredibly cool he was. And of course, he's wearing top hats with feathers sticking out of them all over in jewels, and it was transformative.
a musician's musician, right?
Yep.
And these are the
Yep.
people that we're talking about, and you're right, until you know, music really well, you don't know what you don't know, and it's always like for the Drakes and the Taylor Swifts, there's people behind these people too, there's their, uh their producers and
Mhm.
sometimes they're songwriters and sometimes they're choreographers and it's just these people also sometimes will play smaller shows, and then you're getting the connection there. Like Dr. John is someone who worked with and collaborated with like if you read his biography, it's basically just him only shouting out other musicians essentially,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah.
so I think there's that element too of just, sometimes musicianships get so good that the artist actually becomes niche just based on the level of understanding.
Well, there's somebody like a performer like Dr. John, can like he played with a lot of different people. I have an album here somewhere with Huey Piano Smith, the guy, and it's Dr. John playing piano on it, and it's unbelievable. But after he started making his solo records, Dr. John sounded like Dr. John. He created his own vibe, vibosity, I think he might say even that it only sounded like him, which is super cool. But in terms of playing these small places, like I was just really amazed at how he was just able to sit down on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever the hell it was, and just make this happen. And because I was so close to him, watching him play this, it almost felt like I was in a dream or it was a movie or something because you never get to really be that close and see the magic happen, that close and up close and personal. And so you've got this big personality and he was a big man and he had a big hat on and just everything about him seemed larger than life. And yet he was right there,
Yes.
and that was for me when I think maybe back to all these small shows. And this is a little bit of a cheat because it wasn't a show. But when I think back to anything that I've seen that has been small and intimate like that, that might be the one that really gave me a little goosebump still.
Yeah, I think that would do it for me too. And now that you
Yeah.
say it, I have one and maybe we'll wrap up soon after that. But um, my one, if I had to think of the one that gave me goosebumps, is I've been a Bare Naked Ladies fan all my life. I think
Oh, yeah.
Gordon is one of the best albums ever made. When the Bare Naked Ladies split, meaning Stephen Page left the rest of the group, I was devastated. I personally am a Stephen Page fan. Never really been a big Ed girl myself, which is my prerogative.
Yep.
So I had seen the Bare Naked Ladies without Stephen Page at the Saddle Dome, massive venue, one
Right.
of like these thousand people, like multi-thousand people venues we see. That's where like the Flames play potentially. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe a year later, Stephen Page is playing by himself at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology campus bar, okay? Which is an absolutely beautiful campus, one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever seen. Got a beautiful view of downtown. I actually, side note, had fallen down the stairs at work the day prior, but I woke up that day feeling totally great. I went to the Sate bar. There was maybe 50 of us. So it was
Right.
a perfect amount. And they all loved Stephen Page too. He sang almost every song from Gordon. I was singing, I was dancing. It was the most incredible day of my life. I woke up the next day and couldn't move
Yep.
because the fall had been more damaging than I suspected, but I always
Yep.
thought that was my Stephen Page miracle, and thank you to Stephen Page, and if I had to compare, there is zero comparison to the massive Stampede
Yep.
Saddle Dome show with the whole group and all the special effects, and the tickets were like $100. Sate, it was probably $15. I was yeah, like you said, it was magical. This person who took up so much space in my head mentally, inspired me so much, gave me so much just to think of as a kid, was right there in front of me singing these songs, and it was one of the greatest moments I've ever experienced in my life. So
Yep, they were a great live band and still are. I haven't seen them for a while, but I used to go see them at a place called X-Rays on Queen Street West before they got really, really big. They were just another band that played, and X-Rays had a great room upstairs, and it was. I don't remember how big it was, probably a couple hundred people, maybe more, but not much more. And there were three bands there every night, and the Bare Naked Ladies used to be one of sort of in their rotation, and they worked hard and they were incredible. But when you see someone in a small place like that, like you were talking about with Stephen Page, maybe me with Dr. John, there is an intimate connection and an energy that just is different than it's going to be if you are in a room. And listen, there's nothing wrong with big concerts. I personally don't love them because the artists are always this big because I'm never in the front row, or you end up watching the entire show on screens. And I'm thinking, did I just pay $400 to stand here and watch someone like where I could watch on television? But but people love big shows. I like small ones. I want to feel that energy. I want to have that connection.
and we can still do this. We can do the festival circuit, support the intimate, iconic venues, and also follow your favorite artists because you never know the type of things that they are promoting. Stephen
Yep.
Page, for example, has a whole um Stephen Page, for example, has Patreon, and you can sign up for
Right.
Patreons, and he does home shows, and again, very intimate. You can like subscribe to different levels and then ask for certain songs in the concerts and things like this. Oh my God, absolutely incredible stuff. I can't thank, artists like this enough for their
Well,
continued
I think that the internet is also, and Zoom and things like that, have given people an opportunity to do something else, which is akin to a small kind of intimate show, but you watch it online. Not quite the same thing, but it feels a little bit more stripped down, which is something that I'm always interested in.
kind of like how people must feel when they're listening to us, Richard.
Maybe so. I hope so. Please tune in next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. YouTube. That was the end of the old Batman show, by
I
the
love
way.
yes.
I
Same. Just call me Batgirl and
know.
subscribe or else.
See you later. Subscribe or else.
Subscribe or else.